Namaste and welcome to Urban Chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, Ajit Datta, very well known columnist and author who has written a book on one of the most interesting figure in contemporary Indian politics, Himanta Biswa Sarma, from boy wonder to chief minister. So we're going to discuss this book today. Thank you, Ajit, for taking out time and joining the podcast.
Thank you so much, Abhinav Bhai, for having me.
So, Ajit, let's start by asking the most obvious and most simple question. Why did you choose Himanta Da to write a book on?
Yeah, so Abhinav Bhai, actually, I have been interested in politics since a very young age. And this format of political biographies has always been my favorite genre of books. Within that format, the political biographies of active politicians, those who are still very much in the game, is something that I've always enjoyed reading, particularly because that really gives you a perspective on why certain things are happening contemporarily when you read one of those books. So that is why such a project had always been on my bucket list. I always wanted to write on a contemporary leader. And when Modi ji took over in 2014 as the prime minister, and the entire sort of the whole political spectrum of India swung from one way to another, at that point, or actually from that point onwards, we saw several prominent people who actually belonged to the opposition set up earlier switch sides and join the BJP. So among them, of course, Himanta Biswa Sarma emerged as the most prominent one. And not just that, if you look at the BJP's core supporters, they are very ideologically inclined and they have not taken to many of these joinings very kindly. But with Himanta Biswa Sarma, it was different. It was like he had always belonged here, and he really took to the party as if, the fish was taking to the water. So at an ideological level, he really fitted the bill perfectly. And more than that, his performance at a political level was something that really brought a lot of political dividend to the party. So therefore, he is somebody who was an extremely interesting figure to write on, especially as somebody who made this transition and why he's somebody who emerged so successfully in the new spectrum. And that's the reason why I chose to write on him. Yeah.
It's a very interesting book, and this is an area which is often lacking in Indian political literature. We don't have too much or too many biographies on the politicians. Forget about the contemporary politicians. We don't know enough about the politicians who are no longer with us. So I think this is a very valuable contribution, Ajit Datta, to the entire literature of the political science in India and also the political biography. But let me ask you let me ask you something which you just mentioned, that Himanta Da has taken to BJP like fish to the water. What do you exactly mean by that? Why that transition was so smooth in his case, or was it really smooth? Did he face initial challenges or obstacles when he joined the party?
So this is a very interesting question, because this is even a question that is obviously posed to him constantly. Now, he makes a very interesting distinction, because he says that in terms of political culture, it was something very different for him, because in BJP, the priority always is that, you say Bharat Mata ki Jai, you always make it about the country. And this is something that is obviously something very alien for anybody coming from a Congress setup, because what they are used to is to put a particular family at the forefront. So he says that in terms of that transition, it was a very different political culture that he entered. However, at the same time, there are two aspects to this. One is that the current leadership of the party did work on making this transition very smooth, because as we know, there have been several instances when people like Himanta Biswa Sarma, who are very strong regional leaders, have gone to Delhi, for whatever issue it might have been in the Congress party. They have waited for days, for weeks together to get an appointment. and they've, many times they've returned home empty-handed. Now, this is the current setup is such that they have a free sort of they can reach out to anybody at the top anytime that they want. They make several trips to Delhi. The leadership keeps a very, very close, tab, a very close interest on what is going on in the Northeast. They are in touch on a daily basis and all of that. So that has obviously helped in making this transition very smooth. Although it's a very different political culture for him, it's something that works very well for him. The other aspect, of course, which is the more interesting aspect, is that Himanta Biswa Sarma essentially comes from the Assam movement. Now, that is where his public life began. And obviously, I'm sure we will get into what the Assam movement was about and all of that to, really give a perspective to the listeners about, why he is where he is today. But suffice to say at this point that the RSS played a very important role in the Assam agitation or in the Assam movement. And because of that, Himanta Biswa Sarma says that he actually knows the RSS from a point in his life in which he had no contact with the Congress even. So much before he came into contact with the Congress party, he was very much in contact with the RSS. And he actually even remembers going to shakhas as a teenager and all of that, because at that time the Assam movement was, one in which all of them were taking part, the ASU, the RSS, everybody. So they were all in that together. So he remembers going to he says that these people are my friends since much before I know anybody in the Congress even. So that connection is very much there.
Let's come to the Assam movement that you talked about. And before that, you said that it was a very interesting transition from a Congress political culture to the BJP political culture.
Yeah.
And I recently there was a meeting, and there have been several meetings I've been part of in the BJP now, where there are people who have joined from BSP, who have joined from Congress party in different parties. And these are big shot people. I don't want to name them. They were very close to the power center in their party. Now they're in BJP. And they also say the same thing. They've never seen a political culture like this that they see in the BJP, where the top leadership is so accessible. You can talk to them. The top leadership sits down and listen to the issues on the ground. They say when they were in BSP and all, they never saw their leader even giving 5 minutes to the issues of the people or discussing with their political leaders. So this is a very important point about the BJP that you have made. But let's come to the Assam movement, Ajit. Could you just explain to our viewer what the Assam movement was all about, and how Himanta Biswa Sarma ji was part of that movement?
Okay, so actually this story begins many years ago, probably in the beginning of the 20th century, when this rampant sort of illegal immigration began from what is Bangladesh today into Assam. And there were several waves of, illegal immigrants coming into Assam. They used to sort of sail up the Brahmaputra. They used to occupy these lands, riverbeds, forests, etc., that were empty. And they slowly started becoming quite dominant in certain pockets, to the extent that the local language, the local culture, etc., came under a massive threat, leave alone the economic impact that it had. So now, the Assam movement essentially is something that came from a student movement or a student body called the ASU, which is the All Assam Students Union. And student politics is something that has been very crucial to the state of Assam, because several movements in the past have also been led by student leaders in the state. So this is also a cause that the student community took up initially. And initially, the whole idea was that, we are going to compel them to let Assamese remain the official language of the state. We are going to compel them to let the culture remain as it is, etc. But then the immigration sort of took a whole new turn after the 71 war and all that, because, there was an even bigger, larger wave that came in after the 71. And of course, there is very clear instances of the Congress party even encouraging this, because there was a vote bank for them that became like a very loyal bank in certain pockets of Assam with illegal immigrants coming into the state. So in 79, this Assam movement actually began in a certain sense, because at that time the ASU was the All Assam Students Union was taken over by two very dynamic young leaders who were both in their 20s. One, of course, was Prafulla Mahantaji, and the other was Brigu Fukanji. And they sort of agitated against this, and with a demand of deporting the illegal immigrants, with a demand of setting a cutoff date after which those who entered would be considered illegal, etc. That was what the agitation was about, and they had support from multiple quarters in the state. It was a complete student-led movement. But the general population, the academic community, everybody supported them in a big way, and this became like a pan-Assam movement that really brought the entire state to a standstill. So there were many aspects to this movement. Of course, some people were lobbying with the government, other people took up arms. They would later go on to become the ULFA, things like that. But for that period of around 6 years or so, this movement sort of raged until 1985, when on Independence Day, the Assam Accord was signed. Now, the Assam Accord, of course, brought in, accepted a lot of these demands. And then within 3 months, there were elections, fresh elections, by that time, of course, the AGP was formed by Mahanta and Fukan and others, and they stormed to power within 3 months as very young politicians who were in their late 20s or early 30s or so. So Himanta Biswa Sarma is born in the year 1969. So he was probably around 10 or 11 years old when this Assam agitation began in 79. And he, of course, became like a very important part of the Assam movement or the Assam agitation at that age itself. And as a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old little boy, he was playing a very important role in that movement. He was, at an organizational level, at the level of a speaker, at several levels. He had already established himself at such a young age. In fact, there's a very interesting story. That's how my book begins, of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was also a very, prominent supporter of that movement, actually watching this little boy of 10 or 11 years old on stage. And, this little boy is driving the audience of thousands of people completely crazy. And Vajpayee makes this remark to the person sitting next to him that this boy will go very far in life. So, that is the kind of reputation that Himanta Biswa Sarma had at that age, at a very young age. And so that is how he became a very important cog in the Assam movement. And then in 85, of course, the Assam agitation happened. And the Assam Accord happened. And after that, the ASU continued to exist. The AGP became more of a political party. And the ASU became like a bit of a mothership in a certain sense. It became like what it's a bit of a wrong parallel, but it's generally compared to what the RSS is to the BJP. ASU is considered to be that body to what the AGP and all of that became later. So, but it was still a student. And Himanta Biswa Sarma became the general secretary of the Guwahati unit, which was, of course, the main unit of the ASU, the backbone of the organization in a certain sense. So that is how he was, completely entrenched and connected to the Assam movement. And then later, of course, the then chief minister, the Congress chief minister, Hiteshwar Saikia, spotted him and knew that he's sort of controlling the backbone of this organization, and he's like the nodal point of this organization now. He was in his 20s back then, and he co-opted him to come to his side so that he could, give a final blow to this Assam movement and break it off once and for all. So that is how Himanta Biswa Sarma made the transition to the Congress party from there. But those ideals and those principles continued to remain.
How was his journey in the Congress, and why did he join the Congress? You have just mentioned his role in the Assam movement, but we know that the Congress party was the one which has no interest in implementing Assam Accord. Congress betrayed the people of Assam. It deliberately brought in the illegal immigrants from Bangladesh and settled them into Assam. Why did he join the Congress then, and why did he continue in the Congress for so long if he had different ideological vision than the one professed by the Congress party?
Yeah, so of course there is one aspect to this. The chief minister of the state laying out this, complete red carpet to a student leader, and of course it was not just that he would co-opt him and bring him to his side and use him as a pawn or something like that. He actually made him like his complete right hand man. He mentored him. I mean, even today he considers Hiteshwar Saikia to be the foremost mentor that he has had, and he has had several mentors through the years, of course. But Hiteshwar Saikia is where he learned his politics from. So that is one aspect of it. The other aspect, of course, is that Himanta Biswa Sarma could have stuck with the Assam movement or with the AGP and all of that. But at that time, there was this realization in him that this movement is sort of becoming too much of an ethnic, state-centered movement. Right, because there were like these organizations from the ASU that were even becoming secessionist in a certain sense. They were demanding independence for Assam and all of that. But he realized at that point that he needs to now become part of a national alternative, because a solution to this entire issue will only emerge from a national alternative. It will not emerge from an alternative that is completely Assam centric and that kind of an alternative. And he even mentions this in some of the conversations that he had with his friends at that point. So, in fact, one of the people I was interviewing with, who actually was spent a lot of time with him during his college era, actually remembers Himanta telling him that, speaking to him about the Ram Janmabhoomi agitation at that point in the early 90s, and telling him that, this is an agitation that will completely shake up the country, and the BJP will emerge one day as the biggest national force to reckon with. So Himanta Biswa Sarma, of course, was politically aware. He was absolutely aware of what was going on at that point. But the fact that the BJP was not an option at that point, a national option for him, was a reality of the circumstances there. So Congress, in a certain sense, was the only option for him to be part of a national platform also, and for him to make sure that his ambitions, his political ambitions, find a suitable place, because in the AGP he would still be part of the second rung of leaders. Brigu Fukan and Mahanta and others were like one generation senior to him in a certain sense, and he had been around them as a child. So that gap would always remain. So where his ambitions and his ideology would eventually flourish was the Congress party. And this is an important point to note, that in terms of principles, in terms of ideology, even as part of the Congress party, you will not find an instance where he ever compromised on it. So he sort of emerged as the pole in Assam politics that was taking forward the ideals of the Assam movement, despite being in the Congress party. So if you see, for instance, there was a lot of pressure from the central leadership to align with Badruddin Ajmal. He was the one who was like their main strategist for so many years. He used to put his foot. You say that, we will be completely finished if we do this. And today you see that there is a lot of truth in that. The party actually aligned with Ajmal, and they are completely finished in Assam for having done that. Even there is a separate ministry in Assam called Implementation of Assam Accord Ministry, which he held for a long time. And there, if you see, under him, that ministry has fenced the maximum number of kilometers of the Assam-Bangladesh border. That was his doing as a minister in the Congress party. So he remained very steadfast in all of this. He made sure that the Congress party's vote bank was always, had the tribals, the T tribe communities, etc. He reached out to them in a big way. And he very much, very consciously kept Ajmal out of the equation. And now, of course, that is like a political strategy or a political game that he is able to play the BJP from a point where there is an ideological backing to it as well. So that is the advantage that he has in the BJP. But that game has remained the same throughout for him.
Yes. But let's say the Congress before Sonia and Congress after Sonia, there's a huge difference between the Congress party as well.
Big difference. Yeah.
And one of the story which became quite famous that before he left the Congress party, that he went to meet Rahul Gandhi and, he was not paying attention and giving biscuits to his Piddi, I guess, right? So, something like that?
Yeah.
So what exactly happened? I mean, you've written his biography. So what exactly happened that he decided to leave the Congress party?
See, actually, until Sonia Gandhi was calling the shots, he was quite respected. I mean, he still says that there was a Sonia period and then there was a post-Sonia period. In the Sonia Gandhi era, she at least understood that this is the main force in the party for us in that state. He is the biggest mass leader. He is the key strategist. He is the main fundraiser. He's everything for the party there. So despite the fact that, and this is something that even Tarun Gogoi admits, that, even when he was the chief minister, he says that, the reason I'm being able to, these are his words in a meeting that he had, that, the reason I am being able to close my eyes on the driver's seat is because Himanta Biswa Sarma is there. So this is the kind of, this was a reality at that point. And this is a reality that Rahul Gandhi, of course, never understood or grasped. Now, now Himanta Biswa Sarma, of course, knew that he was obviously like the second in command, that one day he would probably be the leader in the state. And Tarun Gogoi also probably at a certain level had accepted this, and they had an excellent equation. So there was no friction in between them at all about this fact. When Gaurav Gogoi returned, this was around the 2011 assembly elections. That is when he realized that there is no clear path for him to the throne because this one person is blocking it in a certain sense. In fact, when Gaurav Gogoi returned, Himanta Biswa Sarma was the one who was supposed to, take him under his wings and give him training and all of that. This is something that Tarun Gogoi had himself asked him to do. But then he realized that, this is the person who's the most popular leader in the state. And he's like, obviously the person who will take over after my father and all that. And that is when the friction between the Gogoi camp and the Himanta Biswa Sarma camp began. And Himanta Biswa Sarma, of course, was responsible for the election of most MLAs in 2011. He was the key strategist, and they had won a record mandate in 2011, the Congress party. So everybody owed their allegiance to him. And the moment like these sort of, this entire effort to undermine him and all began, he began asking for the leadership job, obviously. So that is how it all began. And Gaurav Gogoi is somebody who had Rahul Gandhi's ear directly. So Rahul Gandhi was getting a very different picture from the ground. And this meeting that took place, this famous meeting with this PD dog, is just one of the many meetings that took place. I mean, there have been many such meetings where, he was asked to give a presentation and then he was asked to wrap up in 5 minutes. He was told that, you're not understanding the ground reality of the situation. We know that even been an election today and all of that. So clearly, the leadership at the top was not understanding that this man is actually like your man on the ground, and he's the one who's, giving you any legitimacy whatsoever in the state. And after the 2014 elections, the Lok Sabha elections, in which the Congress party had this massive drubbing, and the Modi wave sort of really reached Assam and penetrated it in a big way, because they won half the Lok Sabha seats. They won 7 out of the 14 seats. So at that point, it was very obvious that, a change in the leadership was imminent, and that Himanta Biswa Sarma would take over as the leader. And even the Himanta Biswa Sarma camp even put a deadline for the Congress party to act. They crossed that deadline and all of that. And then Himanta Biswa Sarma decided to have a meeting with the governor. So at that time, suddenly the leadership was, woken up from its slumber. And then I think Mallikarjuna Kharge or one of those leaders actually came down to Guwahati to assess the situation. They even submitted a report saying that that Himanta Biswa Sarma has the numbers and all of that. And Sonia Gandhi, it seems, I mean, this is how the story goes, that Sonia Gandhi even accepted that and told him that, we will let you take over and all of that, but let Rahul Gandhi come. Rahul Gandhi was on one of his foreign trips at that point. So she said, let him come. He will take the final call and then you can go ahead and take over. But then when he came, he refused to, entertain that. He said that no, I mean, we are not going to let a leader like Tarun Gogoi go like this and all of that. This is very insulting for him. We will continue with him. And that is when the Himanta Biswa Sarma camp finally decided that they will bring this government down. So they had the numbers, they had the support of everybody. It's a bit like the Eknath Khadse situation that we are seeing today. And they had this, they had everybody with them from all the other parties. They were ready to take over. All the Congress MLAs were with him. But at the last moment, the day before they were going to actually go and stake claim with the governor, Himanta Biswa Sarma said that I am not going to bring this government down because this is a government that I have brought to power. And there is 1 year left. Let us, do this in the cleanest way possible. There's no point in doing this. This was in 2014, sometime I think in July or August. And he instead just resigned as a minister and he sort of began sitting in the opposition benches with his followers and they started, raising issues against the government and all of that. And he tried to patch things up. He continued to, attempt patching things up with the leadership, with the Congress leadership, because he eventually joined the BJP only in 2015, and so after he joined the BJP, of course, we know what the story is after that. But yeah, this is how the entire thing sort of proceeded, where there were repeated insults and repeated attempts at undermining him, at trying to show that, he is not the leader that people claim he is and all of that. And they really pushed him to the edge. I mean, until the last moment, he was willing to, stay back and help the party and all of that because this was a government that he had brought to power. But it was almost as if they were actually pushing him off the edge. So that is how things panned out in a certain sense.
You just compared the situation to what's unfolding in Maharashtra today, and the MLAs are in Assam. It seems very soon you're going to write the biography of Devendra Fadnavis as well. But coming back to the Himanta, he joined the BJP, and rest is history. Everyone knows about it. There's no point in repeating all those things again. But there's lots of allegation, especially by the opponents of his and also of the BJP, that he's running an administration which is highly discriminatory. He's clamping down on Muslims. He's taking away their legal rights and constitutional rights and so on. So what is the story there? Because people know from the news that something is happening in Assam, but unfortunately, lots of people don't know what exactly is happening. So if you could shed some light on his policies after he became the chief minister from the BJP.
You see, this is something that this particular narrative comes out very often from the usual suspects, the Lutyens, media, and that entire intellectual call and all of that. That this is somebody who's anti-minority and he's taking action against them, he's depriving them of their constitutional rights, etc. But I'm sure you also would not have come across any instance of anyone in Assam making this point. I mean, nobody from the state has ever raised this issue because they know very well what is going on the ground. There is an indigenous Muslim community that belongs to the state that has forever been part of the state. And that community, in fact, has even taken part in the Assam movement. A lot of the prominent leaders of the Assam movement were Muslims who belonged to the indigenous Assam community. And that community is a highly respected community within the state today. And it's a community that Himanta Biswa Sarma and everybody else have really taken with them, along with them, for everything. There is a crackdown no doubt about that. And there is a crackdown on what is considered to be the illegal immigrants or the illegal immigrant community, which is a massive community in Assam. And obviously, there will be a crackdown since they are illegal immigrants. And this is not a random crackdown either. There are eviction drives from places that they have occupied illegally, from lands, forest land, temple land that they have encroached upon, and things like that. Because one thing is that despite however much fencing and all of that has occurred, you have a river that flows between both the countries. And so this border remains porous in a big way. And unless you actually have incentives, you have measures that actively de-incentivize illegal immigration, you will not be able to get this to stop. And so this is not something that the BJP government has done very seriously from the beginning, even in Sarbanand Sonowal's time, even today. They have taken measures to de-incentivize illegal immigration as much as possible. I mean, during the CAA agitation itself, when the CAA was passed, you had a massive sort of outflux of illegal immigrants who immediately returned there because they thought that their future was uncertain and all of that. So these things do happen. The border is porous. There is movement on either sides. And you have to find a way to sort of say that, this is something that is completely unacceptable to us if you don't want it to happen. And he has taken those measures in a big way. So that is what is actually happening on the ground. Now, obviously, people are going to give it a religious color. They will, blame the BJP. They will, use their usual narratives against the party and all of that. But on the ground, it's a completely different story that is taking place.
Interesting, but Himanta Da plays a very important role in the entire Northeast as well. It's not just Assam. He looks after parties' affairs in the other states or collaborates with the chief ministers and the party leaders of other Northeastern states as well. So what exactly is his role? Did you come across when you were writing this biography, how he coordinates between the center and the Northeast? Because lots of activities are going on in the Northeast in the last 6-7 years, especially the development. I mean, the kind of integration and development the Northeast has seen the last 7 to 8 years was never seen before. So what is his role in the entire setup?
Yeah, so of course, there is one part of it which is the administrative part. The other is the political part. Now, when you look at the political part, Himanta Biswa Sarma has been the troubleshooter for the entire Northeast, even when he belonged to the Congress party. So even in his Congress days, his political role was not restricted to the state of Assam. Wherever there was a crisis, wherever there was an election and all of that, the Congress party used to use his services extensively for anything. Now, it is a different story that this rarely came to the forefront because this, as it happens there, whenever there is a crisis and all of that, and then it gets solved, the state unit would take a resolution thanking Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi for it. But now, today, obviously, he's been given this role of being the head of NEDA, which is the Northeast Democratic Alliance. Now, the BJP, of course, came to power in Assam in 2015. And back then, there were a lot of Congress government that still existed in the Northeast. The Northeast, as a region, can be considered to be the last fortress of the Congress party. Because outside of the Northeast, there is no Congress state government that has gotten re-elected since 2009. So in 2009, Y.S. Rajshekhar Reddy got re-elected in Andhra Pradesh. After that, the only Congress governments that have gotten re-elected, that have received a mandate after serving their entire term, have been Torun Gogoi and 2 other Congress governments in the Northeast. So this was, in a sense, the last bastion of the Congress party as a region. And what he did was that in the span of just 2 or 3 years after taking over as the head of NEDA, he took over as the head of NEDA on the day that Sarbanand Sonowal was as the chief minister. So Sonovalji became the chief minister and Himantaji became the head of NEDA. And since then, in the span of 2 or 3 years, every Congress government was removed from power in the Northeast. And the Northeast, actually, from being this last fortress of the Congress party, became the first region in the country to actually become Congress Mukt. So it became completely Congress Mukt within the span of those 2 or 3 years. And it's not that BJP themselves formed every government in the state, but the BJP facilitated other smaller parties also in forming governments there with the BJP support. In some states, the BJP was quite non-existent. They even remain non-existent today, but they are partners with the new ruling parties in those states. And the BJP gave them a push. The BJP allied with them. Today, even in majority Christian states, which have populations of 97, 98% Christian populations, you have the BJP, which is a partner in the ruling alliance, which was completely unthinkable. I mean, that is, according to some journalists in the region, the most, the biggest change that one could ever think of in the political, spectrum of the region, that the BJP would be part of a ruling coalition in a Christian-dominated state. But that is what has happened. And it is purely because he has really, worked very hard for this. Not just him, but he was instrumental in this because he understood the region well. He is somebody who had his contacts through the years in different units of different parties, various parties across the region. He is somebody who could bring stakeholders together, thrash out alliances, thrash out compromises, governments, etc. So he is an expert at doing that. And he was, of course, an expert political strategist. So the same way in which, Mamata Banerjee is given credit for having taken down a communist regime of so many decades, he is the one who has done it in Tripura. So he was the election in charge of Tripura when the BJP finally stormed to power from one MLA to actually having a majority in the state. So, of course, there are many other senior leaders at the same time who have worked with him during this transition. Ram Madhavji is there, Sunil Deodharji is there. But Himanta Biswa Sarma was the head of NEDA, so he has played a very direct role in every state for this change to occur. So now the BJP is the main force, the main political force in the Northeast as well. So this is something that he has established.
Interesting, Ajit. I know there's lots to talk about Himanta Biswa Sarma and Assam, but unfortunately, time is not on our side, and we leave something for the next round of discussion as well. But the last question to you, which is the next political biography you're working on, or actually you want to work on?
That's a very interesting question, actually. I mean, when I took this project up, I was actually, when I wanted to write a political biography, I was actually thinking of some of the leaders whom I could, write on. And he, of course, was like the most obvious choice. And it so happened that it worked out very well the moment I approached him. He's somebody who's very approachable and who's who gets things done in a very, without too many qualms, without too much fuss and all of that. So the moment I told him I have this project in mind, he said, okay, come over to Guwahati, let's see how it goes and all of that. So, but now I realize that all the other political leaders that I actually had in mind, somebody has already written on them. So I think it's a good time to wait for other strong leaders to emerge, other strong, interesting leaders to emerge, and maybe take up a project of this nature after some of them emerge.
When was the first time you talked to him regarding this idea? I think it was in Chennai or in Pondicherry, and it was a very casual meeting you had with him.
Yeah. So it was actually at the Pondi Lit Fest. You were also there for it in 2019. So we were sort of talking after his session. I had spoken with him earlier, but it was the first time I met him face to face. And I told him that, a project that I've had in mind because I followed your career closely, which I'd done because I had always found it very interesting for the reasons that I told you. Because after he made that transition, he was definitely he became a leader to watch out for even within the BJP's ranks. So I told him that I followed your career very closely and this is a project that I had in mind. So he said, yeah, if you want to take this up, come to Guwahati. Let's see how it goes. So yeah, that's where it was.
Interesting, Ajit, and thanks a lot for your time. And it was a wonderful discussion as usual. But we are eagerly waiting for the next book by you, Ajit Datta. If not the biography as of now, because you've told us that you want us to wait for it. You want to wait till another leader emerges on the Indian political scene, but hopefully on some other topic as well. But thanks a lot, Ajit, for your time.
Thank you so much, Abhinav bhai.
And thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hoping to see you soon. Namaste.